G'day guys, it's Rob here from Ball Aquatics. Thanks for stopping by for my first video. Now, as it is my first video, I'll have to ask you guys to excuse the cheapo phone and the dodgy camera work. So now that we've got the introductions out of the way, I suppose let's get to it. Now, I was asked to do this video by a customer who saw this tank, and she said to me, I didn't think you could do this. Obviously, as you guys can see from the footage here, she was talking about the convict cichlids that are in with the Africans, and technically she was right. The commonly accepted wisdom regarding keeping cichlids is that you can't keep South American cichlids with African Rift Lake cichlids. Now, as best as I can tell, the reasoning behind this is basically just water parameters. But what I think this fails to take into account is the fact that many of the South American cichlids will cope in pretty much any water conditions. Convict cichlids are a good example of this. And the second thing is that frickin' Rift Lake cichlids have now been kept in the hobby for a very long time, and from what I've seen personally, they are evolving as aquarium fish and are now capable of handling far lower pHs and far softer water than fish caught out of the wild would be. So, what are the water parameters in this tank? Well, water parameters in this tank are exactly the same as what comes out of the tap. So, where I live, we have a pH of about 7.2 to 7.3 and a general hardness of about 140 parts per million and a carbonate hardness of about 160 parts per million. Now, this is below what you're told they can handle. So why are my fish thriving? Now, I believe that it's because they were bred in this water. It's the only water they've ever known. And I think that if you were to release them back into the wild in Africa, into the Rift Lakes, they would struggle to survive there. They would be unable to cope with the water parameters. So as I started to explain all this to her, she politely suggested that I make a YouTube video, and here we are. So, I guess we should start off with who is in the tank. Okay, so first up we've got Grover. Grover's a Cobalt Zebra Mbuna, and he's about 10 centimeters or 4 inches long, and at my best guess I would say he's about 2.5 to 3 years old. And like several of the other fish in this tank, he is a rescue fish, although I've known him since he was bought from the pet store. When I inherited this tank from my friend, he was in there, and he was in there with the 2 convicts. Originally they were in there with 4, I think, bristlenose plecos, but tank was neglected for some time, and I believe that the bristlenoses starved. Not long after that, I was offered the tank and took it over. And Grover is undoubtedly the undisputed boss of this tank. So next up we have Ernie. Ernie is an albino dragon blood peacock cichlid, and he would be about 7 centimeters or 3 inches, maybe a little bit smaller, and I would guess that he would be about 7 to 8 months old, judging from the amount of time I had him and how big he was when I got him. Ernie is the second in charge of this tank, despite being nowhere near the second biggest fish in the tank. And he is my favourite fish in the tank. He has got so much personality. He's just an awesome fish. The next cab off the rank is Bert. Bert is a yellow lab, and I'm guessing that some of you will be seeing a pattern emerge with the naming. And yes, the majority of the fish are named after Sesame Street characters. Bert is another one of the fish that I bought. There's only 3 in this tank that were actually bought. And size and age, I would suggest, are very similar to Ernie. And as you can see, he's an absolutely beautiful fish. As for where he stands in the pecking order, it's kind of fluid once you get down below Ernie. But most of the time, I'd say he's around 3. And next up we have Paddy and Selma, the 2 female convict cichlids, and 2 of the most interesting and controversial residents of the Thunderdome. Now, they're interesting, at least to me, for a couple of reasons. Now, the first reason is that they're both female and they appear to have formed a pair bond. The other thing that interests me about them is that they seem to respond to the mating displays of the male African cichlids. They follow them back to the spot that the male was chosen, and they pretty much go through the actions. And the third thing that I find very interesting is their small size. Now, I know for a fact that they were bought with Grover, and I would assume that they're the same age. As you can see in the footage, they would be no bigger than 3 inches, although they are very fat and quite deep fish, which is far smaller than, you know, their maximum size. I understand that females are smaller, but I don't think they should be this much smaller. Now, when they first were introduced to the tank, when my friend first bought them, these 2 convicts paired up and took over the tank. So they took the prime real estate and they used to chase Grover away. Grover more than makes up for that now. He particularly hates the convict cichlids over any other fish in the tank, and he will go out of his way to chase them away. Which in my opinion says a lot about fish intelligence, but that's a subject for another video. And then we have the 2 Eureka Red peacock cichlids, Elmo and Abby Kidabby. Now, Elmo and Abby are rescue fish as well, and there won't be much footage of them because they are the newest fish in the tank, and Elmo does tend to get a bit picked on, and Abby currently has a mouthful of eggs, so she's not too keen on socialising at the moment. As for how big they are, Abby is probably the 2nd biggest fish in the tank. I have no idea how old they are. And Elmo's about the size of Ernie and Bert. And the last fish in the tank is Silas. Silas is also an albino dragon blood cichlid, out of the same tank that I bought Ernie from, so I would assume that he is Ernie's brother or sister. Now, the reason that I'm a little confused there is that when I bought him, I thought he had more orange markings, not as many as Ernie, but more than he has. But now when I look at him or her, it doesn't seem there's many orange markings at all, so it is entirely possible that that may be a female, and it is much smaller. And now I guess I'll try and explain why I think that this tank works. Now, there are a couple of key points that I'd like to make. I do not believe that this tank would work with a breeding pair of convict cichlids in there, an actual pair. Because I have bred convicts before and they get incredibly aggressive when they have young, to the point where they would attack my hand if I put it in there, which shows that, you know, if it's a fish, they're obviously going to have no fear of it. And as they work as a team, I mean, the faux pair that I have in here work as a team, they are capable of killing much larger fish, so that's something to keep in mind. The other things that help make this tank work, apart from obviously the equipment and everything else, is the cover. Now, I've kept African cichlids before in the past, and I kept them in the fashion that is most common that I see now. That is in a tank that is bare of cover. Now, I didn't have a great deal of problems with aggression, but they were definitely there. Now, I haven't noticed that same aggression since I've set this tank up, and I believe that the key difference is the amount of cover that's given. There are a huge number of caves in here, more than enough for all the fish to have their own, and what that does is it allows the fish to decide whether they want to get away or they're willing to risk being chased. As you can see from the footage, there is some aggression, but the fish can always get away, and if you look closely, there's no fin damage, and that tells me that the aggression is inconsequential even when I'm not around. The other key factor in this tank, and in the relative lack of aggression in it, is Grover himself. Now, he's the tank boss, so he's the most important fish in that tank, and his personality will directly impact the health of the other fish in there. Now, what I mean by this is that if another fish, say Ernie, who is rather more aggressive than Grover. If he is chasing another fish and Grover spots him, the chances are that Ernie will break off the chase because he doesn't want to risk being chased by Grover. And because Grover is generally lazy and only chases the other fish for maybe 3 wags of his tail, that means that the aggression as a whole across the entire tank is greatly reduced. And now in this final part I'll address some questions that I can foresee people having. So the first one is, would I recommend this kind of setup for somebody who is an inexperienced fish keeper or somebody who's keeping cichlids for the first time? And the answer to that is probably no. And the reason that I would say that is not because they wouldn't know what to do, you can learn what to do, but rather that it actually takes time to get to know fish. Now I understand that sounds a little bit crazy, but you need to remember that fish are animals, they're individual animals, they have individual personalities. But all that aside, you also need to remember that they are fish and they think very differently to the way that we do. So things like being able to recognise an aggressive fish, things like that, are just things that, you know, it takes time to learn. You can't really be taught it. And now I'm drawing a bit of a mental blank as to what I might be asked, so I will do my best to answer any questions that anybody has in the comment section below. Now if you did enjoy the video, or you did find it helpful, please do all those cliched things like, share and subscribe. Obviously, as you can see, it's a very new channel, and I'd like to get out there so I can help as many people as I can. So thanks for sticking around. I realise it was kind of a long one, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. But until then, look after one another.